Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, as usual, whatever time of day it is, wherever you are. Welcome to today's Grain Market Blast with myself and the awesome Angie Setzer. It is Monday, the 23rd of June. I have no idea how we've got to nearly July by now, but there you go. As usual, Angie will be providing us with a rapid roundup of the latest pricing flows and market moving news in agricultural markets. But before she does, and so that little old me doesn't get into trouble, because contrary to popular belief, I'm not a fan of spanking. I'll get the legals out the way. So as usual, nothing discussed in this space, this session constitutes trading or investment advice or infers any kind of endorsement by PIQ, myself, Ryan Paisley, or indeed the glamorous with a capital G, Angie Setzer. Angie, how are you, my love? I hope you had a good weekend.
I did. How was your AI pub crawl? Did it work?
It was all right. It was we had to kind of knock it on the head. Well, we had to knock the trail on the head about halfway through because there was a huge kind of protest rally in central London. So we decided to
Oh,
go to a couple of our traditional haunts, and yeah, it got a bit messy. Not
worked
to
better.
the
I like
surprise of
the
absolutely no one.
yeah, knock it on the head is going to be a phrase I need to introduce into my daily. Like, I don't like that.
Uh,
Let's knock it on the head. Like, that is
exactly
the
that.
most
See, look,
literal.
so that's two
Like,
things we between myself and Michael. You've had bits and bobs and
yes,
knock it on the head.
I still say bits and bobbles. You'll never stop me from doing that.
No,
We
true.
won a war for my right to do that. I'm just saying. So,
Fair enough.
a happy Monday. Maybe not the best segue, but speaking of war, apparently over the weekend things escalated a little bit. It's just still a conflict because we haven't officially declared war. I'm not sure where the threshold lies, where it's like, okay, are we at war, or is this just kind of, whatever. But we had the U.S. get involved. Oh, which reminds me, I have read more than one analyst put out today that the Strait of Hormuz is closed. Would you
Oh
like to
God.
explain to the listening
Yeah.
audience that it's not and that it's
Oh
probably
God.
unlikely to be closed? And so, because there's a
I
lot of people that are like, oh, this they voted to close the strait. Oil doesn't care. But let's kind of
yeah.
give,
So
yeah,
that's something that I did, as you know, because you were listening this
I
morning,
did. Yeah, I
bright and
loved it.
early.
I was like,
I
yes,
do love a little rant. Yeah, the usual talking heads are telling us that crude should be trading at $100 a barrel because they're about to close the Strait of Hormuz. They're not.
yes.
All that happened was the Iranian Parliament, which, let's be honest, my mum has about as much say in the military matters of Iran as the Iranian Parliament do. It's purely symbolic. They voted in favour of closing the strait.
Yeah,
Now they don't get a say in this. Is the it's the very the top. It's the Ayatollah and the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. They're the people that make the decision. So until they start talking about closing the strait, ignore what you're seeing because it means nothing. It's just for domestic optics, etc., etc. We're seeing there's been people are jumping on the back of like three ships turned around. They were going through the strait. Well, that's three out of a lot of ships that travel or transit the strait every day.
yes.
And also, three ships that did turn around have now turned around again and they're going
They're
back
going
through the
back.
strait.
Yeah.
So it's a complete nothing burger. And my favourite trade for the past years has been to fade the Globex popping crude if there's been any issues over the weekend. And as usual, it pays. So there we go.
Yeah.
Ignore the hype.
Yeah. In this instance, for sure, and so I did enjoy the rant this morning. I was like, "Ooh, you salty." Someone get this man a coffee. But it was good. I
Yeah.
really appreciate it because I feel the same way sometimes when I see people say things that are not, in part of reality or whatever. Like there's a long way to go to
Exactly.
get there. And so that's the thing. That's what we're watching right now. You're seeing headlines this morning. Obviously, if you weren't paying attention and this is your first dose of news, congratulations. Like, I want to be in that existence for sure. But secondly, we did have the U.S. get involved over the weekend. Saturday night, we bombed three different precise locations. Submarines, stealth bombers, all the like. Brought in our bunker busters, they call them, and really kind of went after the three main targets. There's a lot of confusion at this point about what exactly it did. Like obviously it caused significant damage, but there's talk that they had moved the enriched uranium out of the areas that were targeted. Like there's just some back and forths on what all this means and how Iran will respond. We are seeing headlines here right now that Iran is going to be prepared to respond in the next few days, next couple of days. Most are saying really high alert for our troops in Syria and Iraq. a few other places you've seen folks move, non-essential citizens and even essential and some, well, not essential, but really relatives of essential employees are like, get the heck out of there. And you're
Yeah.
seeing that from around the world, really, like a lot of different, countries are saying probably best to just kind of uh, depart before things get a little scary. We're not sure what happens next. And so in the end, the White House and everyone else is saying that there's still a path for peace. This was just to get to peace. And so we'll see how that unfolds. In the days, hours, really. I mean, this is one of those things could change really quickly by the hour sort of deal. We'll see how that unfolds. So for me, what I'm really watching is how it all plays out with Russia. Because Russia and Iran are have been close. Iran has provided Russia a lot of their weapons. For the fight in Ukraine, Russia has provided Iran with some cash. You've had Russia lose, sort of their ally in Syria here recently. You've got a few other things that are really going on there that could impact the situation in Ukraine. Not to mention, not just on the Russian side, you also have the U.S.'s focus has kind of shifted, and NATO's. Like, what
Yeah.
amuses me is there's a conversation about the NATO summit this week, and they're like, you probably won't formally even discuss Ukraine, like
Yeah.
the situation in Ukraine. Like, we didn't talk about it at the G7. We're not talking, like Zelensky was there. Like, he's still trying to be like, hey, remember me? And the rest of the world's like, yeah, 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 we'll get to you. It's fine. It's just a simmering conflict. Meanwhile, Russia is eating away at Ukraine's eastern border and still continuing to target their civilian infrastructure, their energy, like that's still happening in a very big way. And so there's a lot of things that are taking place that, just
Oh,
it could be problematic as we move forward. I'm here. Sorry, it's just I had a call come through.
okay. No worries.
But just a lot of stuff to be paying attention to on that side of the dice there. When all is said and done. So big one. I don't know any insight, any further insight on your side that you have that you want to throw out there, because for grains, it's really, I don't want to say it's a nothing burger. It obviously, could have some big impacts as we move forward. But at the same time, it's not really a grain centric. It's more of an energy centric, it
Yeah.
seems. But even then, so with your background, like
I
anything you want
no
to toss
to
out?
to be honest, I think we're basically covering it all. I'm just looking at well, funny enough, I'm looking at our PIQ's own Twitter account. Obviously, that's where I get
Right.
my news because it's not me posting it. And the Israeli government spokesperson. I think one of the key things that they've just come out with is, you know, they're kind of distancing themselves from the change of regime. And they
Yes.
have,
What you had seen Trump say a couple different
yes,
times over the
exactly
weekend,
that.
right? Yeah.
The headline that I'm just reading from a government spokesperson now is saying the change of regime is in Iran is up to the Iranian people, which I believe, as far as I've seen, that's been the line by both the US and Israel from the start. I think the only real change we'll see is if that language starts changing. I think that's when we start going down a different path. Because at the moment, it's kind of following, okay, so maybe a bit more severe than we've seen previously when there's been attacks on Iran. But it's very much a leave the door open to the regime to kind of walk back and kind of let things simmer down a little bit. Which and because I think the red line for the Ayatollah, etc., is keeping him staying in power. Now they
Hmm.
don't mind taking hits as long as they get to stay in power, and I think as long as that kind of line is being adhered to, I think it's the route to de-escalation is pretty straightforward as long as that is the case. If we start seeing Israel and the US start saying, actually, no, we are now actively looking for a regime change, I think that's when you'll see Iran, that the powers that be in Iran really start to get their heckles up, and that's when we'll see another escalation. But at the moment, I think we're going sideways. It seems mental to say it because of what's happened over the weekend, but I still think we're going sideways in terms of escalation and what's going on there. Israel have said that the war will end when Israel's object. This is to quote is the
Hmm.
quoting the government spokesperson. The war will end when Israel's objectives related to Iran's nuclear and ballistic missile program are met. Now, we obviously know that the nuclear program's taken a hit. We know that Israel are now looking to take out basically the remaining launchers and stuff of ballistic missiles. So, yeah, I think it'd be more of the same until that's done. And then you know, I hope, because obviously no one likes war. Well, we certainly don't. I hope that perhaps potentially we are nearing the end of this. And I did see over the weekend an Israeli spokesperson say the coming days will start to, wind down. So we'll see. Proof is in the pudding.
Yeah, as long as Iran doesn't continue to attack, they say,
Yeah,
basically, like, if they keep coming after us, then we'll keep coming after them, even if our objectives are met, which we'll
yeah,
see if that becomes a moving target too, and,
yes, exactly.
as we move ahead. But I think that that's definitely an important point, is that there's a lot of people out here that are kind of, losing it, just for lack of a better term,
Yeah,
over
no, definitely.
the whole entire situation, and then in turn they're losing it over the lack of market reaction. But in reality, like you said, I mean, yes, the US got involved, they targeted these three sites, we knew that they would. What exactly is Iran going to do? How does the rest of the world react to it, specifically Russia and China in particular, which at this point they're kind of putting their hands up. Even Russia is like, hey, that was bad, you shouldn't have done that, which is kind of funny, like that was unprovoked and you shouldn't have. But still, we're going to keep talking to you because your thing with Iran and our thing that we have going on are two very different things. Money, please. Like
Yeah,
that's kind of where Russia is at right now, in a lot of ways too. And so it'll be interesting to see. China also came out against it. But, what does this do with China looking at Taiwan? And there's some talk, well, this is going to embolden China. At the same time, I don't know, the rest of the world is on fire. Do they really want to,
yeah, no,
pour
exactly.
gas on it? I think that just destroys the economy more than it. I don't, timing wise, militarily, maybe it makes sense, but economically speaking, it would not for them, I
No,
don't think,
no,
at
no,
this point.
no. I'm with you on
So
that.
I think that's an important point. Trade updates, obviously, kind of got nothing, at least good news wise, I feel like. Sorry. What Japan called off talks. We had talks scheduled for this week. Japan called them off just on the conversation like, hey, we're going nowhere. There has been some reports out that Japan's negotiating team, or Japan's lead negotiator at least, has made like a weekly trip here for the last 6-7 weeks. And there's been some reports that have circulated that they're just super frustrated because the administration cannot have a cohesive, like, hey, if you do this will do these things, like come back to us. Like there's even been a report that circulated a couple 3 weeks ago that like they'd fight at the table, Lutnick and Besant, and like they'd even argue kind of like, no, that's not what we want to
Yeah.
do. And so Japan's kind of like, yo, bye for a minute. Like, we'll just back this is whatever, charge us whatever you want. We have our own shit to deal with. Like, they're dealing with runaway inflation. They've got some problems with, like commodity prices. They're talking about increasing rice exports, which makes zero sense when you're already battling lofty prices. Like we've talked about that. Like they've got some domestic issues happening in Japan there that'll be of interest or something to watch. But they're really just like, okay, whatever. Like we just aren't going to do this anymore. The EU is kind of the same opinion, where they're just kind of like, whatever. We've got our retaliatory response put in place. Like what we're going to do if we can't come
Yeah.
up to a deal. If July 9th comes and you can't come to certain terms,
Well,
then
do you know what?
charge us.
On this,
Yeah.
so Mer's German leader was out about 10, 15 minutes ago.
Yeah.
On the wires, clearly frustrated with how the EU are handling it.
Yes.
He's said that the EU, the way we're doing, I say the EU, is handling this is far too complicated, and they should really, to begin with, focus on specific sectors, i.e., car industry, basically for
Yes,
Germany.
the ones that we
So
need
I
to
think it's
protect.
yeah,
In
so I think
Germany's
it's
eyes.
yeah, exactly. So I think it's interesting to see that Germany themselves are getting frustrated with too much bureaucracy within the EU, which we know it's that's not a new thing.
No.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see if potentially that means that we could see a divergence between member states. We know Italy are gagging to kind of go it alone on their talks,
Right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
but it'd be interesting to see if Germany does kind of splinter off from the EU negotiations as a whole and see if we can get some specific agreements in place, for say Germany's industries.
Yes. Yeah, and I think that's what you may start to see is
Yeah,
individual leaders angling for their better, but at the same time, a lot of these countries at this point are just like, tariff me, daddy, whatever.
yeah,
You know what I mean? Like it's fine, I
yeah,
don't
yeah,
care. Do what you're gonna do because you're gonna do it anyway. And so that's really kind of where We've seen it. Now we'll see if the administration, because obviously, like what I'm just like, oh my God. Because you've got three huge, like four huge, five huge things, you know what I mean? But like it's just
Yeah,
three
no,
specific
exactly.
fronts that I'm paying attention to that the administration is trying to tackle. You've got, your geopolitical, the war, you got Ukraine and Russia, you obviously our involvement in Iran. You've got the trade deal because we're
Yeah,
2 weeks away, 3 weeks away from kind of having that return of the retaliatory rates for the bulk of the globe, except for Britain. Congratulations. Like you guys managed to get in line, first. But then you've got the big beautiful bill is trying to get passed
yeah,
this week too, which is a point I was going to bring up later because the one thing I do want to bring up on trade that I think is super important, and we're really going long, but there's apparently a few things to talk about, is the new China chip restrictions that Trump, like there's still a continuation of crackdowns being floated by the administration on these chip restrictions and what they're going to allow. And so you've got like some of these larger companies there, like Samsung, TSMC, and a few others that have had like blanket approval, blanket licensing for importation of chips. And so now Trump is talking about trying, like they could still do it, but they're going to have to apply for and get individual licenses. And
yeah,
so that's one of the things, these export controls, these licensing things on these exports, on these important, like obviously with chip technology, it's super importante from an AI or an intellectual property sort of standpoint, excuse me, not AI, an IP sort of standpoint, your intellectual property and all of these other things. And so you got to watch that, but the whole entire cornerstone of the London discussion was this opening of trade or this lifting of restrictions from both sides. The other thing that's super interesting is there's a quote floating around, and I was going to check to see if it was actually, I was going to try to find the validity of it just to make sure I'm not repeating something that maybe should not be, like obviously but I think this is a general sentiment of China's leadership where they said, listen, like we want to buy the things that we want to buy. Like you can't force us to buy beef and soybeans to cut a trade deficit. Like we want this chip technology. We want
yeah.
your jet engines. We want these sort of things. And so the US is struggling where it's like, okay, what do we give them that they're obviously going to probably take and try to, make it better or take it and make it their own eventually, but we also need these rare earth magnets and open trade. So we'll see how that whole entire thing transpires. On top of that, we've got weather. Weather looks good for the bulk of the U.S., at least in the eyes of traders. You've got rain. Iowa looks like they're just going to get inundated with rain here. We've had some heat in the eastern Corn Belt that, so far is just making everything really kind of take off from a growth sort of standpoint. Forecast wise, as we work our way into July, there's no real significant heat, at least that I see in the models on the horizon. I'll watch Eric Snodgrass's forecast here later this morning to see if he tells me I'm wrong. And so traders are going to kind of do that. EU is still dry. China's got some issues, but their prices backed off overnight.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, we're just here, as we open up this morning, wheat's down 7. Wheat had a big rally last week. There's a lot of talk of quality issues and harvest delay issues, but now that we're drying out across the southern plains and a good portion of the eastern Corn Belt will be able to see harvest kind of pick up there. Corn's under pressure due to good weather, and everyone is expecting, a negative report from the USDA next Monday. So yeah, this week probably will suck. So how's that for your optimism?
Lovely optimism there. I love it.
Right? That's what I'm generally the world's most optimistic human, but this week I'm just coming into it like, oh God, I hate Monday
Right.
USDA reports, Seth. I'm sorry, he's listening right now. Like I hate Friday ones and I hate Monday ones. And he knows all I do is whine. So he's used to it at this point. I'm like, can't we just do a nice little Wednesday? Like get it out of
Come
the
on,
way, have
Seth.
2
Come
days
on. For
before, 2 days
Angie.
after.
Please.
Like, come on. I thought I mattered. I really did. I never thought I did, honestly. But still. So yeah, we'll see how the rest of the week goes. But honest to God, with that report next week, it's going to be very difficult to make this market, especially corn or soybeans,
Right.
really solidly move in either direction because that is our acreage number. That'll be our final acreage number ahead of FSA data, and it'll update quarterly stocks. And right now, a lot of folks are arguing that the old crop cash market indicates that there's more old crop supply on hand. And so we really need that report next week to show us if there is or there isn't, so we know, and also to give us insight into whether or not we had an increase in acres or a cut. There's been kind of an argument if you're in the eastern Corn Belt, you're not really expecting an increase. If you're in the western Corn Belt, you're expecting an increase. And so we'll see what our friend Lance from NAS tells us. And yeah, the rest of this week though will probably be treading water.
Awesome stuff. Well, thank you so much as usual, Angie. You're an absolute rock star. untold love for you, and also for our listeners. Listeners out there, whatever you're doing today, please stay safe, keep it tight. Much love, and we'll see you all tomorrow. Goodbye.
Have a good one, guys.